Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Classic Gamer 74. I'm your host, Anthony Gamer, and I'm Larry the Lion, and today we're going to be discussing forgotten video game sequels. And with that being said, the arcade is now open. When a video game is popular, one of the first things that game developers do, well, most of the time, is plan out a sequel. A good example of this would be Double Dragon. The arcade game was such a big hit, it was ported out to just about every game system available at that time, and there were plans made for a sequel. And of course, the sequel, Double Dragon 2 The Revenge, became a tremendous hit in its own right. Occasionally, however, you'll have sequels that aren't as successful as the original. This is sometimes called sophomore slump. It happens with albums, sequels to movies, all kinds of places like that. Not to say that sometimes these games aren't good, it's just sometimes they're not as successful as the original. Right you are, Larry. Now remember, back in the day, most games came out in the arcade first, so they became well known in that area. However, sometimes there were sequels that were made that were not made in the arcade. They were, console only sequels. And sometimes those kind of got forgotten or basically, didn't get as wide distribution or commercials like the original games did. Well, whatever the case, that's what we're going to talk about today. So without further ado, let's get into the games. Are you ready? I sure am. All right then, let's check out some forgotten sequels. And our first game for today is Dig Dug 2. Many of you, of course, are familiar with the game Dig Dug. It's that really cool game where you're going underground and trying to get rid of those bad little creatures and stuff. Either you inflate them and blow them up, or you drop rocks on them. Well, there was a sequel, and this one takes place on an island where you're not only trying to get rid of the creatures, but you're also seemingly trying to destroy the island at the same time. This game was not a big, tremendous success. Really, I didn't even hear about it until recently, and I don't believe it got any ports at all. To call Donkey Kong a success is an understatement. It's considered one of the greatest video games of all time. It started the whole genre of the platforming. It was just a phenomenally successful game. The sequel, Donkey Kong 2, Donkey Kong Jr., I should say, was also a big success. Donkey Kong 3, not so much. In this game, you take on the role of Stanley, why not Mario, and you must shoot insect repellent at Donkey Kong to drive him to the top of the screen while avoiding and shooting insects. He must protect 5 plants at the bottom of the screen from being carried off by the various insects. Needless to say, this game was not very successful or well received by a lot of fans, mostly because there was no Mario. It was only ported out one time, and that was for the NES. Later on, when it was reissued, years later, I believe on the, I don't know if it was the 3DS or if it was on the Switch, but Stanley was no longer the protagonist, and they did what they should have done initially, and that is put Mario in. Paperboy was a very successful and actually quite controversial game when it was first released. In this game, you take on the role of a paperboy and you're delivering newspapers around the neighborhood. Of course, you can also break windows, hit people, and all kinds of fun stuff. The game was a tremendous success, and the arcade machine was pretty cool too. I mean, instead of having a joystick, you had a yoke that was shaped like handlebars, and you had buttons to throw the papers. Oh yeah, it was a really cool game. Matter of fact, didn't you blow $10 one time playing that game? Yeah, I did. I went to an amusement park called Old Indiana, which is gone now, but that's when I first discovered the game. I believe it was in the summer of '88, and I just went crazy and spent all my money I was supposed to use for food and stuff. But anyway, and since the game was a tremendous success, strangely enough, they didn't release a sequel to the arcade. The sequel, Paperboy II, was released exclusively to consoles, specifically for the Sega Genesis, which you're looking at here. And here you're looking at the Super Nintendo version. The difference between Paperboy 2 and the original Paperboy is that you can either be a girl or a boy, and you deliver papers on 2 sides of the streets. The game itself was a lot of fun and was pretty well received, but kind of forgotten. I believe that's because it didn't get a port first. A reimagine of Paperboy was made for the Nintendo 64 a few years ago, but this one was never remade, which is a shame because it's a pretty cool game, actually. Burger Time was a big successful game that was enjoyed by people all over the world, and its ports were also very successful. Data East released a sequel called Super Burger Time that pretty much flew under the radar. I actually only discovered this by accident when I was going through my MAME files. It never got a port, and yeah, it was pretty much unknown. I had never even heard of it. This one is a little different because you got to almost jump up and down on the burgers to get them to fall down. Pretty cool game, actually, and a neat concept. The one sequel, though, that was very well known was Diner. Well, I have to kind of disagree with you on that. How's that? Well, it wasn't as well known either. Oh, it really wasn't. Actually, Diner was an Intellivision exclusive. It was a sequel to the original game, and it's really cool. If you've never played this game, I highly recommend it. It is a little on the collectible side, but is definitely one of those hidden gems on the Intellivision. In this game, you once again take on the role of the chef, and this time, instead of building burgers, you're trying to kick the ingredients down to the bottom to make a pizza. Really cool game, definitely one that you should check out if you enjoyed the original Burger Time. Defender was one of those games that we pretty much played until we grew calluses on our thumbs. That's one way of putting it. I'll never forget when my parents first bought the game. Back years ago when we bought this huge, big collection of video games from KB Toys and from Sears. I just lost my mind over this game, I tell you. It was just a lot of fun. Well, I didn't realize until years later that there was actually a sequel, Defender 2. Well, it's kind of basically trying to make Defender, the original one, as much like the arcade as possible. It's not bad. It didn't have the same effect on me that the original Defender did, but, you know, for those of you who are kind of purists and you preferred the arcade game, you probably may enjoy this one more. I have to be honest with you. How's that? I loved Mr. Do, but I loved Mr. Do's castle even more. Yeah, so did my dad. I think he had always said that if he ever got an arcade machine, that would be the one he would get, would be Mr. Do's castle. I mean, it was just so fun beating up those demonic unicorns and stuff, but there actually was a third game, and that's Mr. Do's Wild Ride. I'm not sure if it got a port. I don't think it did. This game is insane. You are once again that cute wizard clown guy, and you're trying to collect cherries. Once again, he must have a thing for cherries. But this time you're collecting them on an actual running roller coaster. I am not kidding. You are on a roller coaster trying to collect these cherries and not get ran over. Wow. I think if they hadn't stopped the series, I don't know if there'd been any limits to what Mr. Do would have done. River Raid stood alone as one of Activision's greatest games, and also because of the fact that it was programmed by a woman, the great Carol Shaw. When River Raid 2 came out, Carol Shaw did return to help with it, but this was not as well remembered as the original. Part of the reason is because it came out during that renaissance that Atari 2600 had in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, so a lot of the games from that time period aren't really like remembered as well as the games from the classic era of Atari. And that's not to say this game isn't good, because it is really good, and it adds a more realism to the whole genre of the airplane shooter game. Really a cool game, definitely one I think that's been overlooked and does deserve a second look. Kubert was another one of those games that definitely was a game changer. Game changer. Real funny. Continue. All right. Anyway, because of that, it was obvious that a sequel was going to be in the works. Kubets Cubes came out a few years later and was not really a big success. It was ported out 2 times by Parker Brothers for the Atari 2600 and ColecoVision, but those games also weren't big hits and are now highly collectible. In this game, you're basically trying to turn the blocks so that they all contain matching colors. There were other sequels and remakes of Kubert, but this one definitely stood alone as an actual sequel. Mappy was a really fun and just awesome platformer game that I enjoyed playing as a kid and as an adult. However, it was not ever ported out until recently by John Champeau for the Atari 2600 in the United States. It was actually only ported out a couple times. Probably the most well-known was for the NES, or excuse me, the Famicom, because I don't think it got a US release. There were some sequels that were exclusive to Japan. One of them is this interesting game called Mappy Land that takes place in an amusement park fighting the same evil gang. Casey Munchkin was supposed to be the mascot for the Magnavox Odyssey 2, and he was until Atari sued Philips because they claimed that this game was a ripoff of Pac-Man, which they had the licensing to, and an appeals judge agreed with them. So when they made the sequel, it was a maze game, but you were mostly focusing on eating this caterpillar from behind one piece at a time and chomping on some other things. It's a really cool game, and honestly, it's a whole lot of fun, just like the original Casey Munchkin was. Lately, it was remade for the 7800 by Robert A. Crescenzo, a brilliant programmer in his own right. Zaxxon was an isometric shooter and was a big success for Sega. Its sequel, Super Zaxxon, was more the same, except for this game was a whole heck of a lot harder and faster. You didn't fight a robot, you fought that evil dragon at the end, and I tell you, this game was hard. Really difficult. I suspect that may have been part of the reason it kind of is forgotten and really wasn't ported out anywhere. Just about every computer system, game system ever made has had Archidoid on it. It's just one of those games that just says, port me. I mean, honestly, I tell you what. But the game Archidoid II, The Revenge of Dope, was not as well received, and I don't even know if it got any ports. If it did, it probably was overseas. I know Archidoid was a much bigger hit in Europe than it was over in America, yeah. So it's kind of along the same lines as the original Archidoid. If you loved Archidoid, you'll probably love this game. Me personally, I wasn't a big Archidoid fan. I wasn't either, mostly because I really sucked at it, and still do. Bubble Bobble was a tremendous hit around the world, especially in Europe, where the game is totally in legendary status, right up there with Dizzy. Not so much in America, but actually the game was pretty well respected, and I knew several people that had it and were totally addicted to it, especially my friend Andy, who had it for his NES, and he just loved the game. Many people on this side of the pond don't know about the sequel called Rainbow Islands. In this game, you are once again Bub and Bob, but they're in human form, and you are trying to collect fruits and climb to the top with rainbow power. It's a pretty cool game, kind of different than Bubble Bobble, but if you enjoyed Bubble Bobble, you'll probably enjoy this one. Ikari Warriors was a big hit, both in the arcade and in its various ports. The second game, Victory Road, not so much. I had never even heard of it until one kid in school was bragging about the fact that he had it, but then he wouldn't talk about it because he was a dickwad. Anyway, in this game, the two guys that look like Rambo are back, but this time they're fighting against aliens, seemingly in outer space. It kind of looks like the place where Marvin the Martian hangs out in those Bugs Bunny cartoons, but overall, it's a pretty fun game, and if you really enjoyed the shoot-'em-up action of Ikari Warriors, you're going to love the sequel. If the words up, up, down, down, left, right, B, A, start mean anything to you, then you're probably going to love this next game, and this is Contra Force. Now, Contra itself was a big success, especially on the NES. I can't tell you how many hours Anthony and me and our other friends killed playing that game. The sequel, Super C, was also pretty cool. The third game, though, Contra Force, not so much. Yeah, it seemed by about this time that they were kind of running out of ideas. Although they would continue to make more Contra games, none of them were as great as the first two. I'm not saying this game isn't good. It's good, but it's not quite Contra. Many of us were so disappointed with the Pitfall game for the NES, we hoped there wouldn't be another one. But there was, and I'll tell you what, it was really good. Yep, you're looking at Pitfall, the Mayan adventure that was released in 1995. And Larry's got a point. Ugh, yeah, that Pitfall game for the NES was just bad. If you ever watched The Angry Video Game Nerd, he did a video on it, and he was exactly right. Which is really sad because the first two Pitfall games were just awesome. And this one goes back to that awesomeness. Really, I would like to see some new Pitfall games come out for this new generation. Activision, I know they don't really care about what most people think, but hopefully they'll get their act together someday and make a Pitfall game for this new generation of game players. But I doubt it. Gauntlet was a big success for Atari, and rightfully so. The dungeon crawling game has gone on to legendary status pretty much almost immediately. It's one of those instant classics, if you ask me. Oh, I agree. It was ported out to just about every game system, computer system, and I believe is still getting ported out to this day. However, Atari in 1986 came out with Gauntlet II. Really, it's pretty much the same thing. Just newer levels, lots more monsters, the difficulty level is hyped up, but other than that, it's pretty much just business as usual, which isn't really a bad thing, but overall, you think if there'd be a sequel, they may have added more to it. But regardless, if you loved Gauntlet, and I know a lot of my viewers do, and you haven't tried this game, you've got to give it a try. And we've saved the best for last, and this is an example of some found lost media. What you're looking at here is the long lost prototype for Marble Madness 2. Yep, it was found, I believe, this past summer, and was finally dumped and made available to play on MAME. You do need to get a special version of MAME for it, which you can find on archive.org. Just follow the instructions. It's really worth the trouble to try it, though, because this is a really, really cool game. At least I think so. And I had a lot more fun playing this than I did the original Marble Madness. There's a long, convoluted story about what happened to this game and all the work people had to go in and do just to make it available. So you can find that on other videos by other YouTubers that go into more detail about it. Overall, this is a great game and really one that was worth the wait. I had so much fun playing it, and I think you guys will too. Hopefully, as time goes on, maybe this can be ported out by some other plucky homebrew programmers. It's hard to say. If you ever played this game, and let us know what you think of it in the comments section below. Were you waiting for it for a while like most everybody else? Tell us some of your stories. Well, this will bring us to the end for today's video. Did we miss out on any games? Let us know in the comments section below, and we'll gladly do a follow-up video. In our next episode, we're going to have games based on literature. Well, that brings us to the end of another exciting episode of Classic Gamer 74. I really hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, let us know by smashing that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. And don't forget to click that little bell icon down there so you'll be notified when I upload new episodes. Also, don't forget to check out our Patreon page. We have some videos you won't find anywhere else there, including a new episode on banned games and one about adult games. That's correct. No matter what level of patron you are, you will have access to all the extra stuff on there. So please, be generous and help us out on Patreon. Also, connect with us on all our social media platforms, and you'll find all that in the description below. Well, until next time, I'm Anthony Gamer, and I'm Larry the Lion. We wish you a great week. Until we see you again, be strong, be safe, be happy, be healthy, and above all, take care of each other, be kind to each other, and stop hate of all kinds. And until next time, the arcade is now closed. See you guys soon. Bye. Goodbye, everyone. Have a great week.